Greetings. Today we cover the new developments with the Roadster. Specs, potential cost, etc. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Bonjour, wie geht's? Zdravstvuyte. Thanks for taking time out once again to view our videos. If this is the first time that you've viewed, please take time to like and subscribe so you don't miss anything. Today's talk focuses on the fact that Elon elected to introduce the new Roadster at the same time as the semi-truck. Obviously it's ready to go, and hence he decided to do that. I thought it was interesting that he chose to do so. I'm going to start off with the raw specs of what was presented and then introduce some thoughts that I have on the whole situation. So first of all, Elon came up with an interesting number. $50,000 down gets you access to a Roadster in 2020 when it's introduced, but he wasn't saying necessarily what the list price is going to be of the vehicle. Based on a $50K down, it kind of has that aroma of $300,000 to $500,000 as a price, and based on the performance parameters, I think that sounds about right. Other specs that he introduced were a 600-mile range, a top speed that's above 250 miles an hour, in addition to, I guess that's mind-blowing enough in and of itself that we could kind of stop there. He also introduced the fact that it's a 2+2, where the top comes off and you actually have room for rear passengers in terms of kid-size seats there. All the other attributes of the car seem to fit what most Teslas have in terms of, supercharger access, as well as engine and battery management capabilities that are common to all Teslas. So I would say that I think it's kind of fascinating. One of the things that Elon did was compared the drag coefficient of the truck to a $2 million Chiron, which is a supercar made by Bugatti, which is a division of Audi. I thought it was an interesting choice of cars to compare to in terms of drag coefficient, because the vehicle that was being compared was the drag coefficient of the truck versus the Chiron, and not the Roadster versus the Chiron. I'm fascinated because other statistics that came out in terms of performance included a 1.9 second 0 to 60 time, and I believe a 4.5 second 0 to 100, and the quarter mile. At all of those numbers are records, and we'll include that, and I think that's pretty commonly known what the deal is on that. As I watched this unfolding and listened to the statistics on the car, I thought I heard a giant "oh no" from supercar manufacturers around the world. And the reason is that, especially when you look at people like Ferrari, etc., there are a lot of wealthy consumers who love cars, love performance, and will actually jump on this car in a heartbeat. There's going to be some nice competition that'll be out there to go with it. But I'm just sort of stunned because the fact of the matter is there's a lot of users of Teslas now that have moved away from the Mercedes and BMWs at the high end to do the Model X and S and even the Model 3. And so now, as Tesla ramps up in the performance realm to start doing supercars, if you will, this creates a huge problem because, I've talked about this before, but one of the biggest disasters of supercar ownership is an example of the fact that for an oil change on a supercar, it can cost you $10,000 to $20,000 because they have to remove the engine from the car. When you're coming in with electric cars that are able to blow the doors off of all the supercars, this kind of creates a major league nightmare because you have all these companies now that have to go back and completely redo their plan. Most have been introducing the concept of electric vehicles, but I think this is a colossal disaster to have Tesla come out with this. I do think it's really nice to have the car come out for one big reason, which is I'm getting tired of the latest sort of Tesla killer coming out and what X, Y, or Z company is going to do in 2 or 3 years. And I think that this car being out and the performance specs being the best ever put on the street by any company, and Tesla not stopping at performance in the 0 to 60 time, but going all the way to 200 miles an hour, I think this car, the Roadster, could put some people out of business. Because for those who are going to spend the money, what I've noticed is that if they're going to spend the money, they want performance that's second to none to go with those large expenditures. And in particular, I'm fascinated because I think the car is going to end up costing about what it costs for the NSX, someplace in the 250,000, 300,000 range. And if it comes in at that number, you've got a hard decision to make. Do you do an NSX for $300K and have all kinds of repair, et cetera, that you have to deal with, or do you do a Roadster that will absolutely blow the doors off the NSX? I have to say, though, that the one thing I don't like about the Roadster is what I call lack of nastiness. And basically, when you look at the car, it's optimized for aerodynamics, and therefore it has a very small wind profile with a sort of a narrow front, etc. It just, I think, really left the designers with very few options in terms of how to really, give it kind of a visual oomph that you might get in other vehicles. I'm particularly a fan of Peter Farina is the designer for Ferrari's cars, and they do other manufacturers. But I'm really impressed by the fact that they actually took a female model, voluptuous female model, had her lay on the ground, and you'll notice the styling cues of the Ferraris are pick up a lot of the attributes of women. And when I look at the Roadster, it is a performance beast, obviously second to none, but it's also kind of in that, looks like a lot of other cars in that space, and doesn't necessarily have a visual wow in my mind. But I guess when you're driving it and you're blowing everybody's doors off, the wow you get is sufficient in that regard. The next thing I wanted to sort of look at was, total cost of ownership also is fascinating to me because I was told that Ferraris have a certain schedule of repair and oil changes, and if you don't maintain those, that book that goes with your car affects what the value of that vehicle might be. So by not maintaining or executing your book with licensed Ferrari repair folks, you could end up negatively impacting the value of your vehicle. And so with Tesla offering all that performance without all the headaches that are usually associated with supercar ownership, I think I know it's going to put at least one company out of business, or definitely cars that will no longer exist. For example, I think the NSX is done, but I think it could jeopardize the future of certain companies that were making certain cars, because the folks that want performance will take it from anybody that delivers it better than anybody else. So Ferrari, Lamborghini, all these folks can't defend themselves if they can't compete in the performance realm against Tesla. The final thing I wanted to note about this is that there's a sneaky thing that's on the back end of the Roadster that's lurking, which is the Roadster is running on a 2170 battery. It's capable of 600 miles of range. The question that's sneaking off the back end is, Elon was saying they have a 200 kWh battery in there, so you have a very light car with the performance parameters that go with the 2170 battery, and the net is 600 miles of range with monster performance as well. And what I was wondering about is what's going to happen with the Model 3, and is this sort of open season hacking for Model 3 owners to hunt for better performance as well as range that's not immediately obvious. And then the final note I wanted to make is that the leader of technology is J.B. Straubel, and his argument has been that there's a 5% increase in form factor for the 2170 battery pack each year. And by the time this thing is delivered, while we're seeing good numbers now, I actually think the performance specs will be better in 2 years in terms of range and possibly even speed. So we'll see if that's the case, and it'll be fun to watch. Look forward to any comments you might have. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Tschüss, macht's gut, au revoir, lahit raot, Khoda Hafez.